Hey, what's up, guys? This is Technical Tim here, and this is part 2 of my video previews for UFC Ottawa, and I'm going to be talking about 2 fights today. I'm going to talk about Derek Brunson and Theodorou, and then I'm also going to be talking about Kyle Nelson and Matt Sayles. So I'll be talking about both of those in this preview, and let's get right into it. No fucking around today. Actually, one thing, like the video if you enjoy this video, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks, guys. But the first fight we're going to be talking about is Derek Brunson and Theodorou. And I'm torn on this fight, and I think Derek Brunson, like we know these fighters, like Theodorou is kind of just like a volume guy who's not dangerous at all. And Brunson's got the higher ceiling. He's way more powerful on the feet, but he doesn't throw as many punches. And even though he's a better wrestler than Theodorou, but Theodorou's fine defensively as a grappler. I don't think Brunson might like get takedowns that can win him the round if the round's close on the feet. But I think generally whoever's winning the striking is going to win this matchup. Like, I actually think Theodorou is a decent grappler, and I think Brunson's a little overrated as a wrestler. But I think this is going to come down to who's going to win on the feet. I really do. And I'm laying off this fight. I go back and forth, and I think now I'm starting to lean Brunson going to win, but there's clear paths to victory for both guys, and I'll get through that. So I just want to start by showing, look at Derek Brunson's significant strikes landed per minute. It's 3.03, which isn't terrible, but that's not particularly high either. And he absorbs 2.55. Some of these he prefers to wrestle in a lot of fights, and he's gotten quick KOs in fights, so these numbers aren't greatly telling of his game. But he tends to not be super high output. And even versus Anderson Silva doesn't throw much output these days. And even though Brunson probably won that fight, the striking stats were pretty close. And Anderson is really low value and has given away many rounds on activity. And what I'm afraid for Brunson in this matchup is if he doesn't land any big strikes, which he very well could, he might nuke Theodorou early, which is why I'm not playing Theodorou, and he could swing rounds, kind of like Lima did against McGee last week, by landing the bigger power shots, because he has way more power than Theodorou, and the power is not even close. But Theodorou definitely has the volume edge, and so let's look at this. Theodorou lands 4.17 significant strikes per minute, and that, even though nothing significant for Theodorou, but he gets the count total up though. And look, he wins fucking decisions all the time. He won versus Anders, and I think this Anders fight could be pretty similar to how this Brunson fight comes out. I think it's going to be a close fight where Theodorou lands more value, but he could be knocked out at any moment, and Brunson can steal rounds by just landing something big at the end of them. But look at Theodorou, 92-65, 77-41. Theodorou also showed good wrestling in this fight versus Trevor Smith, so that kind of echoes my point on Theodorou being a pretty good wrestler, and I don't think Brunson's going to win this fight by wrestling only. Like all these fights, he's outlanding everybody. This turned into a kind of a grappling match a little bit against Tavares, but generally he outlands opponents, and the fact that Brunson had like a pretty close strike total against Anderson Silva makes me way too scared to bet Brunson. Theodorou, with the home crowd and decent counter wrestling and just the ability to just outland his opponent, like that's a great ratio right there. Even though he doesn't land hard, he fucking is smart and wins rounds. Like, he does the best. With his skill set, he utilizes his abilities probably better than anyone. He maximizes them, I mean. Where Brunson's kind of the opposite. Brunson's much more gifted than Theodorou, but he kind of fights like an idiot. So it's a classic power versus volume type of fight where Brunson can get a KO easily in this fight. But at the same time, Brunson, I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of stood there and just got outvalued on the outside. And one thing I do want to point out, Brunson doesn't cut off the cage that well, and Theodorou likes to kind of move laterally on the outside, and you need to cut the cage off to be able to catch him and land on him. And Brunson doesn't really do that. Eric Anders, even though Anders had a horrific fight against Khalil Roundtree, actually cut off the cage really well. If you watch that fight, you can see him cutting off Theodorou and kind of forcing Theodorou into some dangerous exchanges. And Brunson tends to kind of stand on the outside, which I think Theodorou can maybe pepper volume from the outside, and he'll blitz in. So he's not like trapping you. It's really, he just blitzes in, and it's a matter of can Theodorou kind of survive those. If Brunson fought smarter and cage cut and just let his hands go, especially at the end of rounds, I think he would win this fight fine. But I feel like this is a clear pass, guys. Sorry that I've been passing on a lot of fights this week, but passing is just as important as the bets you make. And we got to stay away from here. Brunson could easily win this fight. He's fully capable, but Theodorou is a decision machine. He has the higher output here, and he's a co-main event in his home country. So a fight that comes down to the cards, he could get. So I think we just got to stay away. And the odds right now are like dead even. I think they're both minus 110. So it's like a 50-50 fight. And I think the bookies are probably right here. Just like they were right with Bowler and Adams, in my opinion. I think they're right here. I don't see this as a huge money-making opportunity either way. So let's throw this fight away and focus on some other ones where we could find value. And that brings me to the Kyle Nelson fight and Matt Sayles. Just in case you don't know, I'll give a quick bio on Kyle Nelson. He's a regional guy. He's Canadian, so I don't think this fight is one that's going to be a close decision anyway. So it could, but I don't think the hometown crowd will matter that much for the cards here. So it doesn't scare me that much if you're betting Sayles. But he's a Canadian guy. He has a lot of just wins over like not that great of competition. His best win out of the UFC is Jonathan Brookins, but Brookins is pretty one-dimensional and not really a good striker, and it was still a pretty close fight. And against Ferreira, kind of what I saw in this fight is he gassed out quick, and a lot of people are defending him because he did take that fight on super short notice. But he gassed in like 2 to 3 minutes. And in some of his other fights, like he's not fighting guys who are particularly better than them that can push a pace. So I tend to think like he probably has cardio issues, even though against Ferreira, it was super short notice. I feel like if you had good cardio, like generally, and you took a fight on short notice, you wouldn't gas in 2 to 3 minutes. So I have my suspicions that he has a cardio disadvantage, especially going against a guy like Sayles who throws a lot of output, which I'll be talking about. But Nelson is he's not very good on the feet. He's powerful. He's a big guy. He's going to have the size advantage here. So I tend to think the odds are maybe going to go a late push to Nelson because size advantages, sometimes bettors like going for those fighters at the weigh-ins. So I do think this line is going to go in favor of Nelson. So I am kind of waiting a little bit because I do plan on playing a little bit on Sayles there if the odds are right. But Nelson's he's kind of just like a brawling striker. He'll throw some heavy shots. He's got a little bit of pop. He landed some big shots on Ferreira, but he doesn't look to me like a composed striker who can strike and be defensively responsible for a full 15 minutes, especially if a pace is put on him. And I think that's what's going to happen here versus Sayles. So on the feet, he's just kind of like a brawler. He's not very technical, and I think he's hittable. He's super hittable too. And I think Ferreira was landing even though he landed on Ferreira early, Ferreira really started to land some shots in the later half of that first round and then kind of dominated him on the floor after he pushed the pace. So I don't think he's the best striker. I think he can just have moments, but I don't think moments will be enough here if he doesn't put away Sayles on the feet. He's going to get outstruck bad, in my opinion. And then the best part of his game is he has a pretty heavy top game, and I'm going to get into this, but he doesn't really, offensively wrestle. He more so will get on top off your takedown attempts. So he doesn't scream to be a guy who's going to go out there and try to win by lay and pray. Like, he'll take top position if you force a wrestling exchange, and he's got pretty good defensive wrestling where he can end up on top, and he is pretty heavy there. And I think that's his best way to win here, is if he manages to get on top of Sayles and just kind of grind him out. But I don't think he wrestles proactively enough, and I'm going to show that in a fight. I'm going to get to a fight and we're going to walk through a fight with Nelson. But I think he's too defensive-minded with the wrestling and doesn't really go after takedowns. And the only time I've really seen him get offensive takedowns is when he's clinched up, when someone's initiated a clinch on him. And Sayles doesn't do that all that much. He will if you're really tired, but he tends to kind of stand at distance and put a pace on you. But that's pretty much Nelson. Powerful guy, not that good of a striker. Will probably fold to a pace and strikes. He's not that technical on the feet, but he's got a heavy top game, but he doesn't seem to be a proactive offensive wrestler. And then Matt Sayles, I've actually been pretty impressed by him. Against Shaman Moraes, he won the third round because he has really good cardio and output, and I want to show you in that fight. Matt Sayles, it's just one fight against Shaman, so this is his stats versus Shaman. He landed 6.5 strikes per minute, so he'll put on a pace, and his other fights confirm that too. Like, he's always throwing, always the aggressor, and I feel like he's just going to wear down Nelson on the feet. I think that's the most likely outcome. He has been tagged in, he got tagged a long time ago. What was that fight? Against Brian Hansen. But that was 2014, so it was like, whatever. He got tagged in that fight, so maybe Nelson could flash KO him. It's MMA, but I think that's very, very unlikely. And I think he's pretty much going to dominate on the feet. And his wrestling looks decent, but I have seen him... He'll give up his back and get back to the feet, and that's a good thing. And I think that will work here. But if you put in a body triangle or something, you can get some top time in on him. And I'm going to show a fight with that too. But he throws, and that was against George Hickman. And I'm going to show that fight. But he tends to kind of just, his defensive wrestling looks pretty good on the feet. And this fight was in 2016 versus Hickman. So it's been like 2.5 years. And his striking has improved since this fight. So I'm guessing his grappling has improved a little bit. And it looked pretty sharp against Haja, which was like a 1.5 years later. But against Shaman, like, the only reason he really lost that fight is because Shaman is just super hard to hit. And so he couldn't get his volume going in the first couple rounds. And even though Shaman took those first 2 rounds, Sayles was super competitive. And Shaman is leagues and tiers above Kyle Nelson on the feet. And I think if Sayles can do a sprawl and brawl strategy, he should win. But let's address the path to victory for Nelson, which I think he could get a flash KO. It's possible, it's MMA, but I think it's mostly on the ground of him getting top position. But I want to kind of like talk about how it probably won't happen because Sayles has improved, but I just want to emphasize like that is a path to victory here. But if you look at Matt Sayles here, sorry, I'm like going to the point that's like important, but pretty much this fight was him kind of edging this guy out on the feet. This was a pretty long time ago, but Sayles gets kind of taken down here, right? And this was like really the only time I've seen him held down. He gives up his back, doing the right thing to get back up, but then this guy puts in hooks. Hickman puts in hooks, and then he kind of rides out the position for kind of the rest of the round. And so it was a little concerning because Nelson does have a heavy top game, but that was really... It was kind of this guy initiating the takedown and going for it, and I feel like Sayles isn't going to really go for takedowns here to give Nelson the opportunity to get top position. But this was a little concerning. So this is like my main... I would go heavy on Sayles here if I hadn't seen this situation, but I'm still going to bet him, and I'll tell you like what odds I think you should bet him at because I think they're going to change, but I'll get to that after these exchanges. But then this round, it's pretty much ridden out with him on bottom position. And then Sayles does a good job on the feet and kind of outvolumes this guy. And his striking here is not nearly as good as it is now, so I'm guessing his grappling has improved too. But you'll see, like, situations, like, he has a decent underhook game, and I saw an exchange versus Shaman Moraes where he actually looked pretty good in some of the grappling when Shaman tried to kind of panic wrestle in the third round. So I tend to think his grappling's improved. But the main reason why, let's go to Kyle Nelson now, the main reason why I don't think this is going to be, like, all that big of an issue let's find the sequence. So this is Nelson in one of his fights. And if you look, a lot of his takedowns are... See, this guy, Nelson, is the guy on top. The other guy initiating takedowns, and then Nelson kind of just gets on top. It's not him actually initiating grappling attempts. The only time I've really seen him initiate getting a takedown, like, a lot, is kind of clinch situations, and Sayles tends to not do that. So I think... that was a lot, so I'm going to summarize. So I think overall, Sayles should have way more output and activity on the feet, and Nelson's super hittable. I could see Nelson, because he's a powerful dude, maybe have some success on the feet in the first couple minutes, but I think the pace is going to break him, because I'm not sold on his cardio, even though that was his fight versus Ferreira was a super short notice fight. I don't think you have that big of a dump in a few minutes if you have decent cardio. And then I think the grappling path and the top game path is there for Nelson, but he'll have to do it to win like 2 or 3 rounds here to get the decision. And I just don't think he wrestles enough to make me think that's going to happen. And he'll probably gas later anyway if a pace is put on him. So I tend to think that's not going to happen. He might get like some top position early in round 1 or something, but I think... I'm just not sold that he'll proactively wrestle. And I think this fight is mostly going to be a sprawl and brawl type of fight where Sayles outputs him all day from the outside. But let's look at the current betting odds. So we have... where are we at? So I got Matt Sayles earlier in the week at like minus 160, which was a really good line. And that implied probability is really good. But currently, he kind of jumped up, and he's minus 225, so that implied probability is... right now they're saying he wins like 69% of the time. I think he's probably around... I think he probably wins this fight about 7 out of 10. So I think right now the odds have kind of come back to normal and probably where they should be at, but I have a feeling these odds are going to shift. I really do, because I think Nelson has such a huge size advantage. So if you can end up getting Sayles around, let's say like minus 200, I would aim, even there's probably marginal value. I would aim, I think 200 actually holds value. Like, I think that's fine. But I'd say like in the minus 180 range, that would be really good. Right there. Let me see that. 64. Because I think he probably wins this about 7 out of 10. Or maybe even a little higher, like 7 to 7.5 out of 10. So I think if you can kind of start getting him under the minus 200 range, he's probably value here. I wouldn't go extremely heavy because there is that bottom, that fight against George Hickman where Sayles looked a little vulnerable to a heavy top guy. So I wouldn't go super heavy, but I think like 1.5 units or so around these odds, if they get there, or if you had those available to you, I think he's worth the play. But that's my breakdown. Stay away from the Theodorou fight, and I think if Sayles becomes a little bit less of a favorite, I think he's worth the shot too. But thanks so much. Please like the video if you enjoyed this content, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks, guys. Bye.